Good morning, dear listeners. Settle in, brew some fragrant tea, and get ready for a story that will change your perception of family relationships and financial surprises. Today, we're diving into a dramatic tale of how independence can be the best defense against betrayal, and a mother-in-law's wisdom can be a savior from a son-in-law's greed. Turn up the volume so you don't miss a single word of this captivating story. Enjoy. Lydia Smith woke up, as usual, 15 minutes before her alarm. Outside, it was still dark. A chilly November morning offered no light. She carefully slipped out from under the covers, trying not to wake John, who was snoring, sprawled across most of their king-sized bed. Lydia winced, accustomed to the smell of stale beer emanating from her husband. Yesterday, he'd had an important business dinner with clients. That's what he called his hangouts with friends at the sports bar. A cool shower helped wake her up, and Lydia, putting on her bathrobe, headed to the kitchen to prepare breakfast coffee for herself and scrambled eggs with bacon for him. Not that John deserved such care, but Lydia couldn't overcome the principles ingrained in her since childhood. A husband should leave the house well-fed, even if he woke up at noon and didn't contribute a dime to the family. Opening the fridge, she automatically made a mental note: need to buy groceries. Then, just as automatically, she calculated the expenses: $200 for food, $150 for utilities, $100 to set aside for a summer trip. Though, what vacation this year? She'd probably have to cancel it again. The house. I need to save up for the house. The dream of owning her own home in Malibu, California, appeared to Lydia 8 years ago when she first met the Thompson family at the exclusive medical elite private clinic. David Thompson, a successful businessman, and his wife, Nina, brought their daughter in with complications after an appendectomy. A routine case for Lydia, but the surgery was complex. After discharge, the grateful parents invited the doctor to spend a weekend at their country home. What Lydia saw there astonished her. A spacious house surrounded by ancient oaks, bright rooms filled with air and sunshine, and most importantly, the owner's private study with a garden view. At that moment, Lydia clearly realized she needed a similar house with a similar study where she could see patients, consult, and immerse herself in work in a cozy atmosphere, free from hospital chaos. Her thoughts were interrupted by her cell phone ringing. "Dr. Smith, good morning." Dr. Peterson's voice sounded tense. "We have an emergency. An 8-year-old boy. Ruptured spleen after falling off his bike. His parents are insisting you perform the surgery." "I'll be there in 20 minutes," Lydia replied. Turning off the stove, breakfast would have to wait. In the bedroom, John was still asleep. Lydia quickly got dressed, grabbed her bag, and as she was leaving, ran into her mother-in-law, Susan Davis, who, despite the early hour, looked flawless makeup, hair, cashmere loungewear. Running off again, her mother-in-law asked, pursing her lips. "What about Johnny's breakfast?" "Emergency call. Susan? John's not a child. He can feed himself." "Oh, Lydia, that's not how I raised my son. He's used to care, to attention. A man is the head of the family. It's support. He needs to be taken care of. Right now, the most important thing is to save a child." Lydia cut in, rushing out the door. In the car, she remembered she'd forgotten to turn off the coffee maker, but her mother-in-law would surely take care of it. Susan loved controlling her son's and his wife's lives. Even though she lived separately, she had a habit of coming over almost every morning to make sure everything was in order. The surgery lasted 4 hours complex, exhausting, but successful. When Lydia emerged from the operating room, she was met by the boy's tearful but happy parents. "Thank you, doctor," the child's father said, shaking her hand firmly. "We're in your debt. Name any amount." "It's my job," Lydia smiled. "Your son will need special care. I'll write up the recommendations in the residence lounge." Dr. Peterson was there, drinking coffee and looking through some papers. "Excellent work, Dr. Smith." He nodded. The boy's parents insist on a reward. I told them I'd give you an envelope. He handed her a thick white envelope. $500,000? Not a small bonus, huh? Lydia automatically took the envelope. $500,000. Another step toward her dream. She hadn't expected such a sum, but she didn't refuse it. Every dollar brought her closer to her goal. She returned home late. John was in the kitchen, scrolling on his phone. An empty plate sat in front of him. "Hey," Lydia said, kicking off her shoes. "How was your day?" "Fine." Her husband shrugged. "Got 3 new clients for personal training. One rich lady is ready to pay double." He held out his hand. "Lend me $50. Need new sneakers for work. Mine are totally worn out." Lydia took out her wallet. $50 wasn't much. But why did he always ask her? Why didn't he ever save money himself? "Can't you get it from your clients?" she asked, handing him the bills. "I just got them. They haven't paid yet." John snatched the money and went back to his phone. "And the rich lady's husband is some kind of banker. She hinted at special training, if you know what I mean." Lydia slumped into a chair, tired. She understood. John often hinted at special relationships with clients, and it always ended the same way. He'd get fired from another gym and then stay home for weeks until Lydia found him a new job through her patients. "I had a complicated surgery today," she said. "An 8-year-old boy. Ruptured spleen." "Uh-huh," John grunted. "Listen, the guys and I want to go fishing this weekend. Can you spot me 100 for new gear? Mine broke." Lydia closed her eyes. How much more did she have to work, save, and deny herself everything to save up for the house? And why was she doing it all alone? "I'll look in the drawer," she replied. That evening, after showering, Lydia took the bonus envelope from her bag, $500,000. She carefully counted the money and hid it in an old tea box at the back of her closet. John never cared about household details, so the hiding spot was secure. This money was another brick in the wall of her dream, the dream of a home where she would truly feel at home. 3 days later, Lydia's mother, Abigail Miller, called. A former accountant for a large corporation, Abigail had always been practical and prudent. "Lydia, I got your transfer." Her mother's voice sounded concerned. "Are you saving up for the house again?" "Yes, Mom, soon. It should be enough." "Are you sure that's wise?" Abigail hesitated. "You work so much. And John, well, you know." Lydia understood. Her mother had never approved of her choice. "Handsome but empty," she used to say about John, and God knows she was right. But 10 years ago, when they met, Lydia had been blinded by his looks, charisma, and energy. He seemed so driven, so active. Who knew that all that energy was directed exclusively towards entertainment, not building a family or a career? "Mom, the house will be in my name," Lydia assured her. "And John doesn't know how much I've saved." "Honey, come over this weekend." Abigail sighed. "We need to talk seriously about your finances." "Nah." On Saturday, while John was getting ready for his fishing trip, Lydia went to her mother's. Abigail lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood. She met her daughter, as always, with a laid table and a folder full of documents. "I was thinking," she began without preamble, pouring tea. "You regularly transfer large sums to me. You say you're saving for a house. What if your husband checks your accounts, realizes how much you really have, and starts demanding his share?" Lydia frowned. She had never thought about that. John wasn't interested in finances, except when he needed money for his own needs. "I have a proposition," Abigail continued. "Let me hold your savings in my account, and when you have enough, we'll draw up a gift deed from mother to daughter. Such money isn't divided in a divorce." "Mom, John and I aren't getting divorced," Lydia protested. "Of course you're not." Her mother nodded. "But prudence never hurts. I worked as an accountant for 40 years. I know how to protect capital." After much discussion, Lydia agreed. That same day, she transferred all her savings, $2 million, to her mother's account. Abigail immediately drew up a will, naming her daughter as the sole heir to all her property and savings. Time flew. Lydia continued to work, take extra shifts, and operate on the most complex patients. Her reputation in medical circles grew, and with it, her fees. Every dollar she earned, she sent to her mother. John changed gyms, had affairs with clients, borrowed money from his wife, and never returned it. Little changed in their married life, except for a growing estrangement. Lydia understood more and more clearly that she was living with a man who saw her only as a source of funding for his needs. But divorce would mean admitting defeat, the collapse of a long-standing relationship, and she kept putting off that step, focusing on her goal, the dream house. Then a miracle happened. Lydia's distant aunt passed away, leaving her a 3-bedroom apartment in downtown Los Angeles. The sale of this property brought in another $1 million. Now Lydia had enough funds to buy the house she had dreamed of for so long. When she told John about her decision, he showed genuine interest in his wife's life for the first time in a long time. A house in Malibu. His eyes lit up. That's awesome! We can set up a gym there, invite clients, and have barbecues with friends in the summer. Lydia said nothing. She wasn't going to turn her future home into a gym for her husband and his friends, but there was no point in discussing it now. First, she needed to finalize the purchase. With her mother's help, she found the perfect option, a 2-story house with a yard in a prestigious Malibu neighborhood. Modern architecture, panoramic windows, spacious rooms, and most importantly, a separate study with a garden view. Everything as in her dreams. The price? $3 million. Matched Lydia's savings. Abigail insisted that $2 million be formalized as a gift from mother to daughter, and the remaining amount as Lydia's personal funds from the sale of the inherited apartment. Why all the complications? John asked when Lydia explained the purchase scheme. You're buying it with your own money anyway. It's a legal formality, Lydia shrugged. The realtor suggested it. John lost interest in the paperwork and returned to planning his future gym. Lydia and her mother, however, meticulously worked out all the details of the transaction to protect the investment from any claims. Finally, the day arrived when Lydia Smith became the official owner of her dream home. She stood in the middle of the spacious living room, unable to believe her happiness. 8 years of saving, overtime shifts, sacrificing vacations and entertainment. And here was the result: her house, her fortress, a place where she would be happy. We need to have a housewarming party, John declared, looking around the property. We'll invite all our friends. Have a barbecue. Absolutely, Lydia nodded. I've already ordered catering for Sunday and sent out invitations to my colleagues. She didn't tell her husband that she hadn't included any of his friends on the guest list. This was her celebration, her achievement, and she wanted to celebrate with those who understood the value of her hard work and contributions. The unveiling and the showdown on the day of the housewarming. Lydia woke up with a feeling of incredible happiness. Her first morning in her own home. She made herself coffee in the brand-new kitchen, stepped out onto the terrace, and admired the view of the property. The neighboring houses were hidden behind tall pines, creating an illusion of complete seclusion. By noon, the catering team arrived, setting up tables, decorating the living room, and preparing the food. Abigail was one of the first to arrive, carefully inspecting all the rooms and nodding approvingly. Good investment, dear. This house will only grow in value. Gradually, other guests arrived, Lydia's colleagues from the clinic, some longtime patients, relatives. John promised to arrive later. He had an important meeting with a potential investor. Lydia didn't ask for details. She was used to her husband living his own life. The party was in full swing when John appeared at the door, but not alone. Next to him stood an unfamiliar man in a sharp business suit, holding a tablet. Hey, everyone, John exclaimed cheerfully. Meet Nicholas Baker, an extra-class real estate expert. He's going to help us appraise the value of our house. The guests froze, glasses in hand. Lydia felt a chill run down her spine. John, what are you talking about? She asked quietly. Why do we need an appraiser? Her husband smiled that same smile he usually used to charm his clients, but in his eyes, something new, cold, and calculating gleamed. Dear friends, he announced loudly, raising his glass. Taking this opportunity, I want to make an important announcement. I'm filing for divorce. The house is jointly acquired property, so I am entitled to half. Nicholas will determine the exact value of my share. A stunned silence fell over the living room. Lydia felt the ground give way beneath her. 8 years of her life. 8 years of saving on everything. Endless shifts and surgeries. And now, John, who hadn't contributed a dime, was claiming half. Guests shifted uncomfortably. Lydia's colleague, Sarah Green, choked on her champagne. Someone gasped softly. Doctor, Peterson frowned and set down his plate of salad. The realtor, Nicholas Baker, apparently not expecting such a turn of events, professionally maintained his composure. He cleared his throat and took a measuring tape from his briefcase. With your permission, I'll start with measuring the areas, he said in a businesslike tone. Living room, kitchen, hall. Excellent layout at first glance. High ceilings add to the value. John smiled triumphantly, watching his wife's reaction. He expected hysterics, tears, maybe even attempts to throw him out. But Lydia stood motionless, like a surgeon before a complex operation focused, with a straight back and an inscrutable face. Excuse me, she said quietly, addressing the guests. It seems my husband decided to turn the housewarming into a show. Please, everyone, continue the party. Cake will be served in half an hour. She walked over to John and said, quietly but firmly, We'll talk about this later. Don't ruin the party for people. Why later? John loudly retorted. Let's discuss everything now. With witnesses 1.5 million, that's the price of my freedom. Half the value of our cozy little nest. Fair, isn't it? Lydia looked at her husband the way she looked at her students when they made elementary mistakes in the simplest procedures. John, you didn't put a single dollar into this house, she said calmly. How can you claim anything? Sweetheart, don't make me laugh. Her husband sneered. We've been married for 10 years, by law. All property acquired during marriage is jointly acquired, which means it's divided in half during a divorce. Ask your lawyer if you don't believe me. Lydia turned away. She didn't want to show how deeply his words hurt her. 10 years together. 10 years she carried their family, paid the bills, endured his infidelities and idleness. And this was his gratitude. The guests shifted awkwardly, unsure how to react to the scene. Some quietly moved towards the exit, whispering apologies. Others pretended to be extremely interested in the appetizers. Nicholas Baker, as if oblivious to the drama, methodically walked around the house, measuring rooms, photographing the interior, and making notes on his tablet. Excellent bathroom finishes, he commented. Italian tile? Yes. That significantly increases the value. And this kitchen equipment German, if I'm not mistaken. Very good. Very good. See, darling, John said, pleased, watching the appraiser work. You invested well. The market price of our house is even more than you paid. My share could increase to $2 million. How convenient. Isn't it? Sarah Green, Lydia's old friend from medical school, exclaimed. John, have you lost your mind? Lydia worked like a dog for 8 years to buy this house. And you come in here and claim half? Law is law, sweetheart. John smirked. I was a model husband. I supported my wife morally. That costs money, too. You know. Sarah gasped in indignation. Doctor. Peterson stood up and purposefully walked towards John. Young man, he began in his strict head of department tone. You are overstepping all bounds of decency. If you have any property claims against your wife, resolve them privately, not in front of a dozen witnesses. John shrugged carelessly. I'm just clarifying things. Sir, so there are no misunderstandings later. Lydia watched the scene with a growing sense of unreality. How could this happen? How could the man she had lived with for 10 years turn out to be so distant, so calculating, and so cruel? At that moment, her mother, Abigail, approached her. Abigail had been sitting silently in the corner of the living room the whole time, carefully observing what was happening. Her face expressed neither surprise nor anger, only the concentration of an experienced accountant analyzing figures. "Lydia," she said softly, taking her daughter's hand, "don't worry, everything will be fine." In her eyes, there was a special gleam that Lydia remembered well from childhood, the way her mother looked when she had an ace up her sleeve, a plan no one suspected. Nicholas Baker finished inspecting the first floor and went upstairs. John followed him like a faithful dog, constantly throwing in comments. "Notice the view from the window. That's at least plus 10% to the value, and this walk-in closet. Isn't it magnificent? How much do you think it adds?" Lydia pulled her mother aside. "Mom, what should I do?" she whispered. "Can he really sue for half? I put all the documents in my name." Abigail smiled cunningly. "Remember our conversation. Remember what I advised you." Lydia nodded. Of course. She remembered. Her mother had suggested holding the money in her account and then formalizing it as a gift. This protected the savings from a husband's claims in a divorce. "Don't worry, honey." Abigail stroked Lydia's hand. "I worked as an accountant for 40 years. I know all the laws about jointly acquired property better than any lawyer." She adjusted her gray hair, pulled back in a neat bun, and resolutely walked towards the stairs, where John and the appraiser were just coming down. "Johnny, dear," Abigail began with a benevolent smile that wouldn't fool anyone who knew her longer than 5 minutes. "Can I have a word with you, see?" John, annoyed by his mother-in-law's interference, reluctantly stepped aside. "What is it?" "Abigail, we're having a serious conversation with an expert here." "Precisely. About something serious is what I want to talk about," the woman said softly, but her eyes held a steely resolve. "You're aware, aren't you, that I gifted Lydia most of the money for this house?" John frowned. This conversation was clearly not going according to his script. "What are you talking about? Abigail Lydia saved for the house herself for 8 years. "Johnny, do you remember where Lydia got the money to buy the house?" his mother-in-law asked innocently, raising her voice so everyone present could hear. "She gave me her savings, $2 million to hold on to. I kept them in my account for 6 months. Then officially gifted them to my daughter through a notary." The guests who remained in the living room held their breath. Nicholas Baker looked up from his tablet, sensing something amiss in the conversation. "A gift from mother to daughter is not jointly acquired property," Abigail continued in a didactic tone, as if lecturing freshmen. "And the other $1 million Lydia received from selling her grandmother's apartment, that's also her personal property, which isn't divided in a divorce." John's face rapidly changed expressions, from self-assurance to bewilderment, then to irritation, and finally to the realization of complete failure. You set this all up," he hissed through clenched teeth. "Set up?" Abigail asked, genuinely surprised. "What exactly? I simply helped my daughter protect her honestly earned money. And the fact that it turned out to be protected from unscrupulous encroachments, well, that's just a happy coincidence." Nicholas Baker, who had been awkwardly shifting his weight the whole time, finally decided to intervene. "Mr. Smith, if what this woman says is true, and she has documentary proof, He trailed off, unwilling to state the obvious. "I have all the documents in perfect order," Abigail cut in, pulling a thin folder from her bag. "Notarized gift deed, bank statements, certificate of inheritance. You can examine them if you have the appropriate qualifications." John turned pale. His plan to get rich through divorce crumbled before his eyes. The realtor awkwardly put away his measuring tools, realizing his services were no longer needed. "You planned all this deliberately," John hissed, addressing Lydia and her mother. This is fraud." "Fraud," Lydia calmly echoed, stepping closer. "No, John. Fraud is when a person lives off his wife for 10 years, contributing nothing to the family, and then tries to take half of her savings. That's real fraud." "But, Abigail, you said money was tight." John suddenly whined plaintively, as if recalling a childhood tactic to pressure his parents. "For your needs, it was always tight," his mother-in-law retorted. "But I will always help my daughter." A tense silence fell over the living room. Guests exchanged glances, unsure how to react to the family drama unfolding before their eyes. Nicholas Baker packed up his tools and quietly moved toward the exit. "Ladies and gentlemen, I think I'll be going," he mumbled. "I don't think my appraisal is needed anymore." "Wait." John tried to stop the appraiser. "We're not finished. I want to know the exact value." "John!" Lydia's voice came out unexpectedly firm. "There's nothing more to appraise here. The house is my property, and I want you to leave it immediately." "You can't kick me out. I'm your husband," John protested. "Still your husband," Lydia calmly corrected. "But not your roommate. This property belongs to me, and I have the right to decide who stays here." John looked around the living room. Everyone present looked at him with disapproval. Even the hired caterers stood frozen with trays, watching the unfolding scene. "Fine," he hissed through clenched teeth. "I'll leave. But this isn't over. Lydia, I'll hire the best lawyers. I'll prove your gift scheme is a sham." "Go ahead," Abigail shrugged. "Just remember, a good lawyer costs a lot. And you, as far as I know, don't have the money for serious litigation." John clenched his fists but remained silent. Then he turned and quickly went upstairs. 15 minutes later, he returned with a hastily packed duffel bag. "I'll be back for the rest of my things," he said, heading for the exit. "Don't forget your sports trophies," Abigail called after him. "Otherwise, I'll throw them out." John slammed the door so hard that the crystal glasses on the serving table rattled. After he left, an awkward silence settled in the living room. Guests didn't know how to react, express sympathy, pretend nothing had happened, or discreetly leave the party. Lydia took a deep breath and turned to her remaining friends with a forced smile. "I apologize for this performance," she said. "It seems I just got not only a new house, but also a new status almost divorced woman." Sarah was the first to approach her friend and hug her tightly. "Lydia, you're amazing. Not everyone would dare to take such a step." "I didn't dare for 8 years," Lydia said with a bitter laugh. "If it weren't for Mom—" She turned to Abigail, who was already directing the waiters to serve dessert. "No time for moping," her mother said sternly, noticing her daughter's glance. "We're having a housewarming, and we'll deal with the divorce later. It's no more complicated than an annual accounting report." Gradually, the atmosphere in the house began to thaw. Guests moved on to dessert. Conversations flowed cautious at first, then more lively. Someone put on music. Someone else opened a new bottle of champagne. Nicholas Baker, who hadn't dared to leave, stood in the corner, awkwardly glancing at the homeowner. Finally, summoning his courage, he approached Lydia. "Dr. Smith," he began. "I wanted to apologize. Your husband, that is, Mr. Smith, didn't explain the true purpose of the appraisal. He said you were planning to insure the property." "Don't worry. You were just doing your job." Lydia smiled tiredly. "If you ever need real estate services—" The realtor extended a business card. "I'll give you a significant discount and full confidentiality." Lydia automatically took the card. Who knew? Maybe she would indeed want to sell this house someday. The house that was supposed to be the embodiment of her dream, but, on its very first day, was tainted by an ugly scene. When the last guests left, Lydia collapsed onto the sofa in the living room and, for the first time all day, allowed herself to relax. Abigail sat down beside her. "Well, there," her mother said, looking at the empty glasses and unfinished cake. "I put him in his place pretty good, didn't I?" Lydia smiled weakly. "Mom, you're a genius. But how did you guess he would do that? That he would choose today, of all days?" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I didn't guess." Abigail shrugged. "I just always prepare for the worst. Professional habit. When you're dealing with money, you have to foresee all the risks." She paused, then added, "Besides, I never trusted that charlatan from the first day you brought him home. Handsome, arrogant, narcissistic, such men always look for an advantage." 10 years, Lydia whispered. 10 years of my life, all for nothing." "Not for nothing," her mother countered. "You became an excellent surgeon, bought your dream home, and got rid of a parasite who was sucking you dry. I'd say that's a very productive decade." Lydia unexpectedly laughed. Her mother always knew how to put a positive spin on things an accountant's approach to life assets and liabilities, profits and losses. "What if he really hires a lawyer?" Lydia asked. "What if he tries to dispute the gift?" "Let him try?" Abigail scoffed. "I have all the documents in order. The gift was formalized 6 months before the purchase of the house. The notary can confirm there was no pressure. Everything's legal." She took her daughter's hand. "Lydia, stop worrying. You're a surgeon. You make decisions every day that affect people's lives. Are you really afraid of some divorce proceedings?" Lydia shook her head. Her mother was right. As always, she would handle it. She had survived years of medical school, internship, and her first independent surgeries. Compared to that, divorce was just a formality. "He won't come back for his things," she said suddenly. "His pride won't let him." "Of course he won't," Abigail agreed. "He'll find a new victim, some rich, lonely woman who will support him for the next 10 years. Lydia sighed. Perhaps that would be the case. John always knew how to charm women. His looks, charisma, ability to say sweet words, it all worked flawlessly on lonely, successful women craving warmth and attention. "You know," she said, looking out the window at the darkening garden, "I really am free. For the first time in 10 years. No obligations, no guilt, no compromises. And a beautiful house to boot." Abigail nodded. "Don't forget that." "Yes," Lydia smiled. "My home, my fortress." She stood up and walked to the panoramic window. Beyond the glass, a well-kept yard stretched out, illuminated by garden lights. Her own piece of land, her space that no one could take from her. And in the window, her reflection, a tired but resolute face of a woman who had finally found freedom and confidence in tomorrow. "I put him in his place pretty good," Abigail repeated, walking up to her daughter. "Now, let's have some tea in your new kitchen." And Lydia thought that divorce was also a kind of surgical operation. The main thing was to remove the tumor in time before it spread, the aftermath and the final victory. The morning after the eventful housewarming party greeted Lydia with a silence that felt almost tangible. For the first time in many years, she woke up alone in the huge bed, without John's familiar snoring, without the smell of stale beer and his scattered belongings. It was a strange feeling, a mix of emptiness and freedom. Rays of morning sun filtered through the blinds, creating intricate patterns on the walls. Lydia lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had happened. 10 years of marriage, 10 years that ended in a humiliating scene at her own housewarming. Her phone trilled with the alarm 6:30. Time to get up. At 8:00, she had a scheduled surgery at the clinic. Life continued, despite personal dramas. She got up, made the bed, and headed to the bathroom spacious, with a huge walk-in shower and a jacuzzi. Everything she had dreamed of, equipped with the latest technology. The kitchen, where no one would leave dirty dishes scattered about. a walk-in closet that would only hold her clothes, and most importantly, the study with a garden view, her own space for work. This entire house now belonged only to her, her fortress, her achievement, her victory. Descending the stairs, Lydia heard sounds in the kitchen. Abigail was already bustling about, preparing breakfast. "Good morning, Mom," Lydia said, entering the kitchen. "You didn't have to stay. Leave you alone after yesterday," Abigail scoffed. "No way. Besides, I had to make sure your ex didn't show up in the middle of the night with some new claims." She placed a plate of omelet and a cup of freshly brewed coffee in front of her daughter. "Eat. You need your strength, and not just for surgeries." Lydia obediently picked up her fork. Her mother was right. She would need strength. Ahead lay divorce proceedings, possibly litigation over property, and the emotional roller coaster that inevitably accompanied a breakup, even if the marriage had long turned into a sham. "Did he call?" she asked, sipping her coffee. 3 times. Abigail nodded. "First, he demanded to speak to you. Then he threatened a lawsuit. And the 3rd time, he tried to find out if what I said about the gift was true. And what did you say? That all the documents are with my lawyer, and if he wants to see them, he should contact the lawyer." Abigail sat down next to her daughter. That cooled him down a bit. He probably realized it was serious. Lydia sighed. Serious, yes, to say the least. John would never forgive her for this humiliation, especially the public one. He would seek revenge. She knew his character. What if he really hires a good lawyer? She asked. What if he can prove the gift was fake? Lydia. Abigail put her wrinkled hand on her daughter's. "I thought of everything. The gift was formalized 6 months before the house purchase. The money really was in my account, and I really transferred it to you as a gift. All taxes paid, all documents in order. No court will recognize it as a sham transaction." She paused, then added, "Besides, I doubt John will find the means for serious litigation. A good lawyer costs a lot. And your husband, as far as I know, was always broke." Lydia smiled weakly. Her mother, as always, thought practically an accountant's approach to life: calculate everything, foresee everything, minimize risks. "Thanks, Mom," she said, squeezing her mother's hand. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "Nonsense," Abigail waved her off. "You'd manage. You always do. Sometimes you just need a little accounting intervention." They both laughed, and Lydia felt a little lighter. After breakfast, she drove to the clinic. In the usual morning traffic, she gradually switched from personal problems to the upcoming work. Today, she had a complex operation: removal of an abdominal aortic aneurysm in an elderly patient, a case requiring full concentration and skill. At the clinic, she was met by Sarah Green, her longtime friend and colleague. From Sarah's look, Lydia immediately knew the news of yesterday's scandal had already spread throughout the medical center. "How are you?" Sarah asked when they were alone in the residence lounge. "Fine," Lydia answered automatically, putting on her scrubs. "Everything's fine." "Lydia, it's me, your friend since the first year of med school. Don't give me that everything's fine stuff. I saw what happened yesterday." Lydia slumped into a chair. Her feigned calmness cracked like thin ice. "I just can't believe he did that," she whispered. "Right at the housewarming, in front of everyone, as if he deliberately wanted to humiliate me, to crush me." "Because he did," Sarah nodded. "He deliberately chose the moment when you were most vulnerable, when all your friends and colleagues were there. It was a planned attack." "But why?" Lydia shook her head. "If he wanted money, he could have just talked to me privately. I could have given him something for a while after the divorce." "Money was only part of his plan," Sarah said grimly. "The main thing was to hurt your pride, your reputation. He knows how much you value your colleagues' opinions, so he hit where it hurt most." Lydia thought about it. Maybe Sarah was right. John had always been a master manipulator, for 10 years. He skillfully played on her feelings, her fear of loneliness, her sense of duty. "You know what?" Sarah suddenly said. "To hell with him. You got rid of a toxic husband and kept your house. I'd say that's an absolute victory." "If it weren't for Mom," Lydia began. "Yes, your mom is a real hero." Sarah laughed. "Abigail was always a step ahead of everyone. Remember how she figured out the dean was taking bribes even before he got caught?" Lydia smiled. Her mother indeed possessed astonishing intuition and practical common sense. These very qualities had helped protect her daughter from her ex-husband's greed. "All right, enough gloom." Sarah clapped her hands. "You have surgery in 40 minutes, and you haven't even looked at the patient's latest lab results." The workday helped Lydia distract herself from personal problems. The surgery was successful, though it took longer than planned. Unexpected complications arose, but it was in such situations that Lydia felt most alive, most useful. Her hands did what most other surgeons' hands could not. They saved lives. After the surgery, she conducted several more consultations, and by evening, she felt completely exhausted, physically and emotionally. Returning home, Lydia suddenly realized she would now find an empty house. Her mother had probably already left. She had a meeting with former colleagues that evening. John would no longer be there, no scattered socks, no dirty dishes in the sink, no loud football on TV, and no hugs, not even formal ones. No, "How was your day?" No presence of another person. This thought hit her unexpectedly hard. Lydia parked outside her house and sat in the car for several minutes, just staring at the lighted windows of her new home, huge, beautiful, and so empty. Sighing, she got out of the car and walked to the front door. But before she could insert the key, the door swung open. Finally! Susan, her mother-in-law, stood on the threshold. "I've been waiting for you for an hour." "Lydia?" Lydia froze. Just what she needed. Her mother-in-law had never been her ally, but after yesterday, Lydia expected the woman to keep her distance from her and the scandal. "Susan," she said coldly, "to what do I owe this visit? Don't just stand there." Her mother-in-law stepped aside, letting Lydia into the house. "We need to talk seriously." Lydia walked into the living room, tossing her bag onto the sofa. Her mother-in-law followed her like a shadow. "I don't understand how you got in," Lydia said, taking off her coat. "John has keys," Susan replied as if it were the most natural thing. "He gave them to me so I could pick up his things." "And where is he?" Lydia looked around as if expecting to see her ex-husband hiding behind the curtains in the living room. "At a hotel. Very upset. By the way, he didn't expect such treachery from you." Lydia barely suppressed a nervous laugh. She was treacherous. After what John pulled, "Susan," she said slowly, trying to speak calmly. "Your son came to my housewarming with an appraiser, announced a divorce, and tried to take half of a house he didn't contribute a dime to. And you talk about my treachery." Her mother-in-law pursed her lips. "John has every right to part of the family property. You were married for 10 years. He supported you morally, created a home, was there for you." "Was there for me," Lydia interrupted. When he disappeared on fishing trips with his friends, or when he had affairs with clients, or when he drank away my money." Susan straightened up, as if she had swallowed a stick. "Don't you dare talk about my son like that. He's a real man. It's not his fault you're obsessed with your career and can't create a normal family." Lydia took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Arguing with this woman was pointless. She had always considered her son perfect and blamed her daughter-in-law for all problems. "Susan," she said in the most even tone possible, "I'm very tired. I had a complex surgery. Let's postpone this conversation until another day." "No way," her mother-in-law cut in. "We'll resolve everything now. John is ready to drop the lawsuit for property division." Lydia raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Oh, and what changed his mind so quickly?" "He consulted with a lawyer," Susan replied reluctantly. "And as it turns out, your mother really did everything correctly." Gifts and inheritance are not subject to division in a divorce. Then what are we talking about? Lydia shrugged. If even a lawyer confirmed that John has no right to the house. It's not about the house. Her mother-in-law lowered her voice. It's about other assets. Your accounts, car, jewelry. My accounts are empty. All the money went into the house. The car was a gift from the clinic for a series of unique surgeries, and I hardly have any jewelry. As you know. Susan waved her hand irritably. Don't pretend. You must have savings. You earn well at your clinic. All savings were invested in the house, Lydia patiently repeated. And the money I earn now goes to repaying a loan for equipment for my home office. This was a lie. No loan existed. But Lydia knew her mother-in-law would believe it. She always believed in financial problems, especially if they affected her son's interests. Well, Susan was clearly disappointed. In that case, John agrees to a quick divorce, but with one condition. I'm listening. Lydia crossed her arms. He wants you to pay him compensation $300,000. That's much less than half the value of the house, but enough for him to start a new life. Lydia was silent, considering the offer. $300,000 wasn't a huge sum compared to what John could have demanded, and if it helped avoid lengthy litigation, a drawn-out divorce, and constant stress. I can give him one night of $100,000, she finally said. But no more. And only after the divorce is finalized? Susan shook her head. $100,000 for 10 years of marriage, that's insulting. Susan, Lydia was losing patience. Let's call a spade a spade. Your son has no right to a single dollar of my money. The fact that I'm offering him $100,000 is purely my goodwill and desire to end this story quickly. Her mother-in-law measured Lydia with a cold gaze. I always knew you were calculating. My poor Johnny, 10 years wasted on a woman with an icy heart. Okay, $200,000, Lydia suddenly said. That's my final offer, and only after the divorce, and on condition that neither he nor you ever appear in my life again. Susan opened her mouth to object, but then seemed to change her mind. She straightened her shoulders and walked towards the stairs. I'll pack his things. John will decide whether to agree to your terms or not. Lydia nodded tiredly and slumped onto the sofa. Fragments of thoughts raced through her mind. $2,000 was a large sum, but if it was the price of her freedom, perhaps it was worth it. Half an hour later, Susan came down with 2 huge suitcases. That's not everything, she said. John will come for the rest himself or send someone. Let him give me notice, Lydia replied. I'm changing the locks tomorrow. Her mother-in-law pursed her lips but remained silent. At the exit, she turned around. I'll convey your offer, but don't be surprised if John decides to keep fighting. He always gets his way. Tell him I do too, Lydia said quietly, closing the door behind her mother-in-law. The following weeks turned into a strange mix of normal life and constant tension for Lydia. She went to work, operated, consulted patients, and furnished her house, getting used to the new space. But all this time she awaited John's next move. Would he sue? Would he accept her offer? Would he try to find some other leverage? Abigail, who now often stayed overnight at her daughter's, advised her not to fret and to live her life. If he wants to fight, we'll be ready, she would say. And if not, all the better. It was her mother who first noticed that the house was being watched. The same car has been there for 3 days now, she said one morning, looking out the window. A gray sedan, and a man in it with a camera the whole time. Lydia went to the window and saw the car parked across the street. A middle-aged man in a dark jacket sat behind the wheel. Do you think John hired a detective? She asked, feeling a chill run down her spine. Most likely. Abigail nodded. Trying to find dirt or prove that the gift was fake. But what can he find? We didn't break any laws. He can look for any little thing. For example, if you suddenly lend me money, he might try to present that as proof that I wasn't a true donor. Lydia shook her head. That's absurd. The gift was 6 months ago. I can do whatever I want with my money. Of course it's absurd, her mother agreed. But desperate people cling to any straw, and John is desperate and angry right now. The surveillance continued for several more days. Lydia felt uneasy, knowing that her every move was being recorded, but she tried to live normally, work, tend to her home, and meet with friends. Then, John unexpectedly agreed to her terms. He's accepting $200,000 and wants a quick divorce, Susan informed Lydia, calling her at work. But the money is needed immediately after signing the documents, not in a week or a month. Fine, Lydia readily agreed. Let his lawyer contact mine, and we'll finalize everything. She was surprised by such a quick surrender. John wasn't one to give up easily. Something wasn't adding up. She shared her doubts with her mother. It's strange that he agreed so quickly, Lydia said, pouring evening tea. John usually bargains until the last minute, and here he just accepted the offer. Abigail thoughtfully stirred sugar into her tea. Maybe he really needs the money. Or, she trailed off as if considering something. Or what? Lydia asked impatiently. Or he has another plan, her mother said slowly. Something that will allow him to get more than $200,000. But what can he do? Legally. The house is protected. Accounts are almost empty. The car was a gift from the clinic. I don't know. Abigail shook her head. But I would be very careful if I were you, especially when signing the divorce documents. Lydia nodded. Her mother was right. As always, she needed to be on guard. The divorce process was scheduled for the following week. Lydia's lawyer, Mr. Thompson, assured her that all documents were in order and there should be no hidden pitfalls. All your assets are protected, he said, looking through the papers. The house is not subject to division. The car neither. Only the household appliances and furniture in your old apartment are considered jointly acquired property. But you're willing to leave that to your ex-husband, as I understand. Yes, Lydia nodded. Let him take whatever he wants from the old apartment, and I agree to pay him $200,000 as we agreed. In that case, there should be no problems, the lawyer concluded. The divorce will be finalized quickly and without unnecessary emotions. But Lydia continued to feel uneasy. Something bothered her, a premonition. John had never been so agreeable, never given up so easily. The day before the divorce proceedings, she received a strange call from an unknown number. Dr. Smith, a male voice asked. Yes. This is she? Who is this? My name is Alex. I'm an acquaintance of John Smith. I need to meet you. It's very important. Lydia tensed. Regarding what? Not over the phone. The man insisted. It concerns your divorce and the papers you're about to sign tomorrow. Hucky, Lydia's heart skipped a beat, so her premonitions weren't in vain. John was up to something. All right, she said after a pause. Where and when? In an hour. At the Library Cafe on Main Street. I'll be waiting at the entrance. I'll be wearing a blue jacket and a gray beanie. Before heading to the meeting, Lydia called her lawyer and told him about the strange call. Be careful, Thompson warned. This could be a provocation. Don't sign any papers. Don't agree to any terms. And it's best to bring a witness. Lydia called Sarah, but she was on duty and couldn't leave. Her mother also didn't answer. She had a meeting with friends across town. Lydia had to go alone. The library cafe greeted her with dim lighting and the smell of fresh pastries. At the entrance, a young man in a blue jacket and gray beanie nervously shifted his weight. Seeing Lydia, he nodded nervously. Dr. Smith, please come in. I've taken a table in the corner. She silently followed him. Whatever she was about to hear, it was better to do it away from prying ears. When they sat down, Alex nervously clasped his hands on the table, glancing around as if fearing surveillance. He was a young man in his 30s, with a short haircut and an anxious look not at all like John's usual confident, boisterous friends. Thanks for coming, he said quietly. "I wasn't sure you'd agree to meet. You said it concerns my divorce." Lydia looked him straight in the eyes. "I'm listening." Alex looked around once more, then took a folded sheet of paper from the inside pocket of his jacket. "Here." He handed the document to Lydia. "This is a copy of the agreement John intends to slip to you tomorrow during the divorce. Read it carefully, especially the fine print at the end." Lydia unfolded the sheet and began to read. At first glance, the document seemed like a normal divorce settlement standard phrasing, familiar clauses. But when she reached the bottom of the page, her eyebrows shot up. In tiny print, the last paragraph stated, "As additional compensation for moral damages, Lydia Smith agrees to pay John Smith the sum of $800,000 within 30 days of signing this agreement." $800,000, Lydia looked up at Alex. "He's lost his mind." "Not entirely." Alex shook his head. "The plan was to swap the documents right before signing. John arranged it with some clerk at the courthouse. You were supposed to be given this version instead of the one the lawyers agreed on." Lydia felt nausea rise in her throat. Such deceit! Even knowing John, she hadn't expected such a low trick. "Why are you showing me this?" she asked, carefully studying the young man. "You said you were John's friend." Alex gave a bitter laugh. "I'm not a friend. I work for his mother. Or rather, I did." He paused. "I'm an administrator at the Olympus gym. Susan is a regular client of ours. She gave me financial assistance when my daughter needed surgery. In return, I was supposed to help John." He lowered his eyes. "I followed you, photographed you, collected information. I was the one sitting in that gray car near your house." "So you're a private detective?" Lydia asked, surprised. No. Alex shook his head. "Just doing errands for money. I really needed money." He paused, then added, "But it's one thing to follow someone, and quite another to participate in document forgery. That's a criminal offense. Besides, my daughter is currently undergoing rehabilitation after heart surgery that was performed at your clinic, not by you personally, but under your supervision." Lydia thought about it. Heart surgery. Recently. Their clinic had several complex pediatric cardiology cases. She oversaw these operations, though she didn't perform them herself. Not her specialization. Annie Miller. It suddenly dawned on her. 7 years old. Mitral valve prolapse. Alex's eyes widened. "You remember. You see so many patients. I remember all the children," Lydia simply replied. "The surgery was very complex, but successful." "How is she now?" "Much better." Alex smiled, and his face transformed from tense to soft, almost dreamy. "The doctors say in 6 months she'll be like new. She can even go swimming. She dreams of learning to swim." He suddenly stopped, as if remembering why they were there. "Anyway, I couldn't participate in this." He nodded at the paper Lydia still held. "Especially when I found out you were the doctor who saved my daughter." Lydia watched Alex carefully. He didn't look like a scammer or a provocateur. His eyes showed sincere gratitude and shame for what he had been forced to do. "Thank you," she finally said. "You took a risk telling me this." "Not as much as you think." Alex shrugged. "I've already quit the gym, found a job somewhere else, far from John." He stood up, pulling on his beanie. "I have to go. Good luck tomorrow, and be careful. John isn't used to losing." When Alex left, Lydia sat over her cup of cold tea for a while longer, mulling over the information. Document swap, what a cynical, dirty trick. And how typical of John smiling to her face, promising an amicable divorce, and at the same time preparing to stab her in the back. She dialed her lawyer's number. "Mr. Thompson, I need to see you urgently. New circumstances have arisen." The final confrontation. The morning of the divorce proceedings was overcast. Heavy clouds hung over the city, threatening cold November rain. Lydia woke with a sense of anxiety that hadn't left her since her meeting with Alex. Abigail had prepared breakfast, but Lydia barely touched the food. Her stomach was knotted with tension. Eat something, anything, her mother insisted. You'll need your strength. It's going to be a tough day. I can't, Lydia shook her head. Just coffee. She and her lawyer had discussed the situation the night before and devised a plan of action. Thompson assured her that document swaps weren't uncommon in divorce cases and they would be ready. The main thing is to read everything they give you to sign carefully, he said. And absolutely do not rush, even if they try to hurry you. Lydia arrived at the courthouse early. Her lawyer was already waiting in the hallway, reviewing some papers. Good morning, Dr. Smith, he greeted her. Ready for the final act of your family drama? I hope so. She smiled weakly. Though it feels more like a surgical operation than a play, a complex and painful one. Thompson nodded sympathetically. You're right, but I'm a good surgeon in legal matters. Trust me, everything will go smoothly. John and his lawyer appeared precisely at the appointed time. Her ex-husband looked sharp and confident in an expensive suit and a fresh haircut. His lawyer, an older man with an imposing briefcase, nodded reservedly to his colleague. Hey, Lydia? John smiled, as if they were meeting at a friendly gathering. Not in court for a divorce. You look great. Solitude suits you. Lydia remained silent. No point in falling for his provocations. The procedure began routinely. The judge, a tired middle-aged woman, quickly listed the grounds for divorce, asked if either party wished to reconcile the marriage, and, receiving negative answers, proceeded to consider the property issues. According to the documents provided, she stated monotonously, the parties have reached an agreement regarding the division of property. Ms. Smith transfers all movable property located in the apartment at, the judge read out the address of their old apartment, and also pays compensation of $200,000 to Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith does not claim the real estate acquired during the marriage. That's correct, John's lawyer confirmed. No objections, Thompson added. In that case, please sign the agreement. The judge handed the papers first to John, then to his lawyer. After they signed, the documents passed to Lydia. It was at this moment that the swap was supposed to happen, but Lydia was on alert. She slowly, carefully read every clause of the agreement, paying special attention to the fine print. There was no mention of $800,000. Her lawyer also meticulously checked the documents before nodding, confirming everything was in order. John impatiently tapped his fingers on the table while Lydia read. His confident smile gradually turned to irritation. Something wrong? He finally asked. Any issues with the text? No problems, Lydia replied calmly, continuing to read. Just making sure I'm signing exactly what we agreed on. She looked up and met her ex-husband's gaze. Something akin to alarm flickered in his eyes. Can I take another look? John suddenly said, reaching for the papers. I think I forgot to check one point. You have already signed the document. Mr. Smith, the judge said sternly. Now it's your wife's turn. Lydia slowly signed, then handed the papers to her lawyer. Thompson also signed the documents and returned them to the judge. Congratulations, the judge announced. The marriage is officially dissolved. You are free. Leaving the courtroom, Lydia felt John's furious gaze on her. The plan hadn't worked. The documents hadn't been swapped. Maybe Alex had warned not only her, but someone else too. Or the clerk John had arranged with had backed out at the last minute. In the hallway, John caught up to her and grabbed her elbow. What did you do? He hissed. Who did you talk to? Lydia calmly pulled her arm free. I don't know what you're talking about. Oh, yes, you do, John seethed. Someone warned you, but it's not over. I'll find a way to get what's mine. I'm afraid this is the end. Thompson intervened. The agreement is signed. The divorce is finalized. All claims are settled. If you continue to harass my client, we will be forced to file a police report for harassment. John glared but retreated. It's not over. Lydia, he repeated. We'll meet again. With those words, he turned and quickly walked towards the exit, where Susan was waiting for him. His mother-in-law shot Lydia a look full of hatred and whispered something to her son. He furiously shook his head. Then they both disappeared through the courthouse doors. Well, that's that, her lawyer said when they were alone. Congratulations on gaining your freedom, Dr. Smith, and on preserving your assets. Thank you, Lydia smiled. But I'm worried about what he meant by it's not over. Empty threats. Thompson dismissed. What can he do legally? All issues are closed. Divorce finalized. Agreement signed. He'll get his $200,000 as agreed, and that's it. Lydia nodded, but the worry didn't subside. She knew John too well. He wasn't one to easily admit defeat. After court, Lydia drove to the bank to arrange the transfer of $200,000 to her ex-husband's account. Let him have the agreed sum, but not a penny more. She returned home for lunch. Abigail was waiting with hot borscht and news. Susan called, her mother said, stirring the soup. She was screaming that we cheated her son, that you unfairly handled the divorce, that it was all rigged. And what did you say? Lydia asked, taking off her coat. That if her dear son tried to swap documents in court, that's called fraud, and he's lucky the matter didn't go to criminal charges. Lydia raised her eyebrows in surprise. How did you know about the document swap I didn't tell you? Abigail smiled cunningly. And you think only John can hire people for surveillance? I can do a few things too? That young man, Alex, he didn't just happen to come to you with information. You bribed him, Lydia gasped. Not bribed, but helped, her mother corrected. His daughter needed post-operative rehabilitation at a good center. I found out about it and offered to pay for her treatment in exchange for information about John's plans. Lydia shook her head. Her mother never ceased to amaze her. And how long have you been watching him? Since he announced the divorce at the housewarming. Abigail shrugged. I knew he wouldn't give up that easily. Too much money was at stake. She placed a plate of steaming borscht in front of her daughter. Eat while it's hot. You hardly ate breakfast today. Lydia obediently picked up her spoon. The borscht was delicious, tangy, with tender pieces of beef and sour cream. You know, she said, setting down her spoon after a few sips. I can't shake the feeling that this isn't over yet. John won't give up so easily. Of course he won't, Abigail agreed. But what can he do legally? You're protected. The house is yours. The money, too. What's left for him? I don't know. Lydia shook her head. But he'll think of something. He always does. Abigail looked at her daughter carefully. Are you afraid of him? No, Lydia answered firmly. Not afraid. I just know his character. He's vindictive, inventive, and he really hates to lose. It's nothing, her mother said reassuringly. We'll be on guard. Together, we can handle anything. That evening, after Abigail went home, Lydia was left alone in her huge house. She walked through the rooms, turning on lights, checking the locks on windows and doors. It was a strange feeling to be the sole owner of such a space. No one would burst into her study demanding money. No one would snore beside her at night, smelling of alcohol and other people's perfume. No one would criticize her choice of furniture or curtain color. Complete freedom and complete solitude. She stepped out onto the terrace, breathing in the fresh evening air. The garden was shrouded in darkness. Only the garden lights glowed dimly along the path. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The last leaves rustled softly on the trees. Her home, her garden, her life. Suddenly, the silence was broken by her cell phone ringing. The number was unfamiliar. Dr. Smith, a male voice said on the line. Sorry for the late call. This is Alex. We met yesterday. Yes, I remember, Lydia replied. Has something happened? I just wanted to warn you. Alex's voice sounded tense. John is furious. He knows I warned you. His mother called the gym, demanded my dismissal, threatened to sue for disclosure of personal information. Don't worry, Lydia said. They can't do anything to you. You didn't steal any documents. You didn't reveal any secrets. You just shared your suspicions with an interested party. It's not about that. Alex lowered his voice. They're very serious. John threatened to get to you by any means. He said something about your reputation, about the clinic. I didn't hear everything, but it sounded threatening. Lydia frowned. Reputation, the clinic. What did he mean? Thanks for the warning, she said. I'll be careful. And you too. Take care of yourself and your daughter. We're leaving for a while, Alex replied. To my parents in Idaho, until everything calms down. After this conversation, Lydia's anxiety only intensified. John's threats were becoming more specific. Reputation. The clinic. What was he planning? In the morning, she was woken by a call from Dr. Peterson, the head of her department. Dr. Smith, can you come to the clinic urgently? We have a situation. What happened? She asked, instantly wide awake. Not a patient. Doctor. Peterson's voice sounded bewildered. Just come as soon as possible and be prepared for an unpleasant conversation. When Lydia drove up to the clinic, journalists were swarming at the entrance. Seeing her car, they rushed towards her, shouting questions and thrusting microphones. Dr. Smith, is it true that you take bribes from patients? Is it true that surgeries at your clinic are performed by unqualified specialists? Comment on the information about fake medical diplomas among your department staff. Lydia stared in shock at the aggressive crowd of reporters. What was going on? Where did these absurd accusations come from? The clinic's security guards helped her get inside, pushing back the persistent journalists. In the lobby, a pale Dr. Peterson was waiting for her. What nonsense are they spouting? Lydia asked, still not understanding what was happening. Come to my office, the head of the department said quietly. I'll explain everything. In the office, the clinic director, Mr. Williams, and the medical center's lawyer were waiting for them. Both looked extremely worried. Dr. Smith, the director began without preamble. This morning, several major media outlets published articles defaming the reputation of our clinic. They contain accusations of corruption, falsification of medical documents, and, he paused. Specifically, your name is mentioned in connection with receiving illegal fees from patients. Lydia felt the blood drain from her face. That's absurd, she exclaimed. Pure slander. Who authored these publications? They're anonymous, the lawyer replied. But the information is presented as if it came from a former clinic employee who had access to financial documentation. John, Lydia whispered. This is his doing. Mr. Williams frowned. Your ex-husband. But how could he have gained access to internal clinic information? He couldn't, Lydia said firmly, because no internal information exists. All of this is fiction revenge for me not allowing him to take my house during the divorce. She told her colleagues about the events of the past few weeks, the housewarming that turned into a scandal, John's attempt to get half the house, the foiled document swap during the divorce. He threatened that this wasn't the end, Lydia concluded. And here we are. Now he's trying to destroy my reputation and the clinic's reputation. We are already preparing a rebuttal and an appeal to the court, the lawyer said. But you must understand, Dr. Smith, that until all circumstances are clarified, you will have to take a leave of absence. The director finished for him. We cannot allow these accusations to cast a shadow on the entire clinic. This is a temporary measure until we deal with the slander and clear your name. Lydia clenched her fists. So John had achieved his goal. He couldn't take her house, but he managed to hit her where it hurt most: her reputation, her career, everything she had built for years. I understand, she said after a pause. Of course. I will take a leave of absence and cooperate with the investigation if necessary. I have nothing to hide. "We know," Dr. Peterson said softly. "Everyone who works with you knows these accusations are nonsense, but we need time to prove it officially." Leaving the clinic through a back exit to avoid the journalists, Lydia felt devastated. She had achieved her goal, saved her house, gotten rid of a toxic husband, but at what cost now? Her professional reputation, her career, her life's work were all under threat. Lydia prepared for a long fight to clear her name, but this story ended unexpectedly. John lost control and was involved in a serious car accident, resulting in a fatality. He would no longer be able to ruin Lydia's life.